Hi friends, we are diving back into Natasha Denona's newly released Roxa palette, and if you want to check out my first impressions, you can click a link up above in the card or down below in the description box. I had promised in that video that I would return with 6 looks, as I had only done 2 looks in that video, and I love to provide as many looks as possible for inspiration. And also, if you don't have the specific palette, maybe you have purple shadows in your collection that you have not visited in quite some time, and there is now a resurgence for the love of purple. I also mentioned a few comps in that video if you want to check out. And before pressing record on this video, I had filmed one that showcases all of Natasha Denona's palettes that I own and made some swaps with Roxa with shadows from My Dream, Retro, Love. It was a lot of fun just to hypothetically reformat Roxa into something maybe more desaturated mauve if that's what you were looking for, and throwing out different ideas in that respect. If you are a Natasha Denona collector like myself and wanted to take full advantage of your collection, because remember, these minis are magnetic, and when you have the freedom to change Natasha Denona minis, which I think is the incentive for you to buy her palette, so that you have a plethora of choices where you can mix and match with and steer each palette to the direction you think better for your own preferences. If Natasha Denona releases something that you're like, it could be better for me in this way. But we are here today to dive back into more looks using Roxa, and with that said, it's time for you to come in a little closer. That's enough. If you want to check out swatches and retail details, again, you can check out my original first impressions video. But I would like to start off light. And if you happen to have Roxa and you're not familiar or comfortable with these types of shades, I think the most straightforward approach is to apply one of her sparkling foils or her wet effects directly on the lid, and then follow up with blurring the edges with one of her new silky matte formula shadows. This debuted in Roxa, and when I tried these mattes for the first time, I was blown away by how smooth they are, by how impeccable the pickup is. And again, we could go in with Dixie, with Flutter, but I actually want to keep it simpler than that and go in with Regal, which is a beautiful antique rose metallic shade. It's one of the more basic shadows here, but I think it great to know that this texture is finger pickup friendly, where you can tap it on the lid and spread it where it covers lash line to crease, and you have a nice highlight effect on the lid there. To follow up on that for more sparkle, you can apply either Dixie or Flutter. I'll follow up with Dixie, which has a lot more of a reflect effect. And interesting, when you apply Dixie on top of Regal, that combination amplifies the blue pearl in Dixie, so you are left behind with a slightly icier finish to the lids. And for a matte, we can follow up with something soft or maybe something more vibrant. Jacaranda is going to give you a heavy dose of color. If you want to steer away from that, you can stick to Velour, which is the medium lilac, the Orchid, which is the darker purple. I'll actually go in with Orchid. I think Orchid is a lovely shade, and I'm tapping here on the outer V of my lid and then gently bringing that color through the crease by that same tapping motion, so as to not disturb what I already have on the lid. Not that having sparkle through the crease is concerning for me, but I do want to keep the matte more so on the crease and not to move around the sparkles too much. And then following up with a little more color here, and we can also create a larger gradient by inviting one of the lighter shades, one being Phoebe, which is super pastel-y, and then Sweet Pea. I think I'll follow up with Phoebe actually, and that was my Sonia G Kiyaki Kakishibu eye brush, specifically the the T3. Now following up with Rephr's Shoto brush in 03, which has a more stippled design, and I need that quality to evenly disperse the shadow. So again, I went in with Phoebe, that light lilac shade, along the edges of Orchid to create more of that washed out effect throughout the crease. For the inner corner, definitely going in with Stargirl. You could also continue with Pixie because this very much more than appropriate to be placed here on the inner corner for a highlight effect. I think I'll go in with Flutter, which is just a beautiful, and although it appears a little darker than what I have on the lid, I don't mind that change whatsoever because the sparkle factor is stunning, and I think it pairs well what we have on the lid as well as on the crease. Wrapping that shade in and under the lower inner corner, and I do want to follow up with Orchid along my lower lash line. This is Eyeshadow number 2, much like the 3, but you see its thinner construction, so I can create a wispier like effect here on the lower lash line and connect with what I have on the outer lid. And I think that's pretty and presents itself to be on the more warmer magenta side of the palette, especially if you decide to use Orchid as your crease shade, but you very much could have went Jacaranda, which is the more violet part of the palette, or even Velour, which is in between. And to demonstrate that, I'm trying to go a little different than what I did yesterday. And well, we have 4 more looks, so I guess I shouldn't be worried about it. You know, it'd be interesting actually. I want to see how Heather and Jacaranda go together, because Heather is definitely more coral heavy, as you can tell already. And I used Heather, I believe, in my first impressions video on one eye. And again, I cannot get over how successful these mattes are. The pickup is beautiful, but you see how evenly it blends on the skin, where you don't have to over manipulate the shadow. It goes where it needs to, and the finish is just exquisite. Now, following up with Jacaranda, and I remember specifically yesterday, I started off the look, I think it was with Velour, and then I went in with Jacaranda, but I think it'll be interesting to pair the more violet heavy shade with the coral shade and kind of widen the possibility here, and not to necessarily stick to the same undertones here when it comes to the mattes, because with the silky matte, let's see if the texture is great, which we've already experienced yesterday, but now the color science, right? When we mix colors together, will we get another color or will it turn muddy? And that's where I'll mention Viseart. They have mastered their color science, where you can mix and match any matte of theirs and you just get a new color. You don't have to worry about what you're mixing with what. And I think we're successful in getting a nice gradient here where you still see Jacaranda and it's more violet hue, but having Heather as the backdrop, I think that creates a lovely gradient, right? So you can go that route, which very much love inspired in my opinion. Now with what we can apply on the lid. Well, I remember applying Bolt on the lid, so I think today we'll go in with Brink. This is a lovely, more magenta, like an electric orchid magenta shade that is just beautiful, paired with this matte combination we have on the lid and through the crease. Let's pick up a smaller shader in order to refine the inner arc here. I want to make sure that Brink is covering the entire lid, because boy, oh boy, isn't that a lovely shade? And then enveloping over the edges of Jacaranda. Tappity tap, here we go. Going in with Stargirl, which is the silver, or I guess opalescent lavender flip shade, and I'll use that as our highlight of choice, and then bringing that through the high arc and wrapping it low through the inner corner. I could invite another shade, but just for time's sake and simplicity's sake, if you don't want to use a ton of shadow, you can just be a little more minimalistic and straightforward with whatever shade you decide to apply on the inner corner. You'll just use that same shade on the lower inner part of your lash line. Going in with Jacaranda with our smaller shoulder brush here, as I want to add in a little more of that smoke and having that continuity from what we have on the outer lid, and now bringing that to the lower lash line is a good move. Bringing in more of Stargirl and using a larger shader, because I want this to spread longer across my lash line. I don't want it to just stop here. I think that makes for a smoother gradient and overall more comprehensive look on the lash line. And same thing here. I use Flutter as our inner corner highlight, and now layering it over Orchid as I did with the other side. And just for a little definition, you don't have to go this route. I would like to apply Eclipse, the darkest matte we have in Roxa, and just stamp that along the lash line here for a little more definition. But again, I think a light highlighted lid bare without any shadow on the liner is a great way to go. Personally, I just like a little bit of shading here on my lash line. It's not right or wrong, and you most certainly, if you wanted, you could go in with a dedicated pencil, a liquid wing liner for a more bold finish on the lash line. But just for now, for simplicity's sake, and I think overall more beginner friendly to stamp on shadow versus having to pencil on a crayon of some sort is a little easier. Alrighty, first demo's done. Let's slap on these lashes and I'll be right back. Round one complete, and I think these were fairly easy to achieve. I tried to keep the first eye simple and capitalize on these sparkling finishes and not having to layer a ton of shadow on one eye. And happy that we experimented with mixing the different tones of purple. Again, for our second look, we combined the more coral with the more violet, and I think we were successful in that endeavor. I'm happy that we went in with Brink. Brink actually, when mixed with Jacaranda, it almost looks more like a Purple Rain type of a gig, because again, these sparkling foils, they're not super opaque, where layered over different shadows, or more so different tones of shadows, ending result is I think a different color altogether. So you have like that beautiful gradient of more magenta into the more royal purple, and you can see Jacaranda show through because again, Brink is not overwhelmingly that magenta shade. It has a little bit of translucency where that layering I think works to the eye look's advantage. So I'm happy with these two. I hope it was easy to follow and hopefully you will feel inspired to use these shades. But let's head into the second look, and I'm just trying to rack my brain in thinking already what we can do, but when we get there I'll decide. So let's wipe this off and I'll be right back. Round two, and before I begin, let me not forget to apply the primer. I've been using Mother's Eye Primer consistently over the course of the last 2 months, and I rather enjoy its texture, its straightforward formula, and because I don't have anything to compare it to, well, I do compare it to Linda's eye primer. That's a little more silicone-y. I feel this is more wet and therefore lends more tack. That could just be my own perception of things and I could be off, but I like what it's doing to the shadows on my lids. I think we can go smoky this time, and with that said, I would definitely like to start with maybe Orchid and then smoke it out with Eclipse. And you know what? I just realized I did Orchid last time. So you know what? Let me go in with Velour. Velour is the lilac shade. So I'm enveloping it over Orchid and I'm doing a little mixy mix, which, you know, didn't turn out so bad. Mixing a little bit of Orchid with the more lilac hue from Velour. And come to think of it, Mother has a shade called Velour, right? Is that a Divine Rose one? I can't remember. Shame on me. My Pat McGrath facts are just deteriorating by the day. Okay, Eclipse now for that extra smoke. And I'm tapping carefully here on the outer lid, making sure that I'm covering this section well, but I also want to smooth out the blend through the crease, and why I adore T3, because of its barrel shape, you can use one side of the brush to tap on the color and then use the flexible tip, which is not super small but wide enough to manipulate the shadow well through the crease. And surprisingly, when you mix Eclipse with Velour, it kind of is giving Jacaranda vibes, but I guess I'm just saying that since I'm seeing it here in action. if I were to pair these together, juxtapose them, I will probably make out the difference easier, but that's some nice smoke. Yeah, so this is the route you would go if you wanted to vamp up Roxa, right? And take advantage of its capabilities to appear more intense on the eyes. Concord, I would love to go in with, but let me pause here and remind you that is just one way, right? If you wanted this to appear more purple, you can go in with Concord, as I will now. But if you want this to be a little more glam classic, I think going in with Dixie or Regal, or even Stargirl on the lid. I'm thinking maybe Stargirl, because we haven't seen Stargirl in action on the lid yet. Oh, you know what? We're switching. Let's do Stargirl on the lid, because the last two looks, we've used Stargirl on the inner corner for highlight, and we love that. And I can always layer Concord on the outer lid, right? And having Eclipse there already will just amplify, I think, the base color of Concord. But ooh, that's pretty. That was a good choice. Now taking Concord, okay, and tapping that on the juncture here where Stargirl meets Eclipse, and having that transition, I think was yes. And make sure you tap to evenly disperse the texture across your lid, so not one part of your lid has more than the other, is even in terms of how you spread and blend. And now for the inner corner, I'll go in with Regal. Or actually, maybe I can try to pick up just the mint part of Bolt. I know Natasha mentioned that you can try to, I guess, separate the two. Let's see how successful I'm doing that. I think inevitable if you've already swirled these two together, but if you concentrate on just like that mint part of the marble, it does look lighter, or it looks like a lighter purple on the inner corner. Actually, having some of that purple, it doesn't shade the inner corner, which is cool, but I like the effect it has. What do you think? And to refine it even more, if you want this to appear a little more brightened, you could go in with Regal or Dixie, and with that in mind, I'm tapping a little bit of Regal here on top of Bolt, just again to increase the highlight effect and to have more of a distinction there. Dixie on the inner corner, the first shade here, which we applied on top of Regal. Dixie's flip, I remember reading the description for my first impressions video that there was like a bronze flip in here. Couldn't pick up the bronze flip on the swatch, and not even on the application when placed on the lid, but I definitely can see the blue pearls here in Dixie. Look at that. It's so icy. I love it. Taking a little bit of velour through the lower lash line, because I think we have enough of Eclipse here on the outer part of the lash line, and then carrying over Dixie more so over where the two connect, and just blending here further, making sure this appears smooth. And actually we'll invite a little bit of velour here on the edges just to bring that gradient closer to my brow bone. And why not, since we already have it, Phoebe, the lightest matte in the palette, taking advantage of this lighter, almost like pastel matte, and then bringing that to the actual brow bone to see what effect that has. It doesn't have the same effect as I was expecting, but you know, if you wanted to just refine the blend here closer to the brow bone, you most certainly can use Phoebe for that purpose. All right, we got the smokity smoke here on this side, following up with what I originally wanted to do, now with Concord all over the lid, because ooh, that's pretty. One of you had brought up Lisa, I think, one of our beauty bays in the comments. I was asking her what more purple she wanted to see, and mentioned Purple Rain, Blitz Purple from Pat McGrath palettes. I think Concord is going to be your closest match to Blitz Purple and Purple Rain from La Vie en Rose, for sure, because this color on its own is just beautiful. And to refine the application a bit, I'm taking my T2 brush and tapping in and under the crease. I have not yet decided if I wanted to follow up with a matte or see how this shade fares on its own and blending out the edges. I surmise that it will appear kind of what I experienced with Luminous Legends, how some of Pat's metallics have that scatter effect when you blur out the edges. And Concord is expressing similar qualities, but I will use my T4, which is a flat top blender. I think that is an appropriate shape to use and density for this texture, where I'm bringing it now through the crease just to blur the edges. Following up with Concord also on the lower lash line, just to be consistent. You very much well can invite another shade altogether to add a little diversity to the look, but I just love this single purple shade as the dominating color. Did I get? Yes, I sure did. Got Concord on my jawline. I'm so sorry about that. Deciding what matte we can apply to the crease. You could keep this as is. I think this is more appropriate to go along with, but if you wanted velour, I think is a good choice. I think I'll go with Jacaranda because I want to further amplify this cooler violet hue of Concord, right? And why I think Jacaranda is a great choice to go with, but you very much can use the more magenta leaning matte instead. But that for me just pulls it all together beautifully. For the inner corner, I would like to go in with, you know what, let me go in with Brink. Brink is the shade we applied on the lid for the first eye, and having this more electric magenta metallic on the inner corner for me is a win. It's giving me Gem and the Hologram vibes for sure. A little bit of an 80s feel, if you know what I mean. Kind of like Subversive in a way. Night Creature leans like a little more violet magenta. This is more electric pink, right? Almost like what Cosmic is giving. And I'm tapping on Regal. Regal for me is like a supportive metallic, right? If you feel it doesn't do enough on its own, it's superb to help out in terms of lighting up certain metallics here, sparkling foils or whatnot, to just make it appear more bright on the inner corner, but still have that color remain showing through. A little bit of Concord here. You might want to use a smaller pencil brush. I'm just lazy and I'm not looking for it right now. And a little more Brink here on the lower inner corner. Yes, and actually bringing Brink here through the inner arc in a more enveloped fashion. Yes, that is it. All right, let's apply these lashes and I'll be right back. And here is round two, capitalizing on Eclipse's depth to create a smokier glam eye with the Roxa shades. And the second eye was more monochromatic in sticking to the more violet tones from both Jacaranda and Concord. And my apologies for not having the shadow on now as I speak about these looks, as I just completely zoned out. And after taking the photos, I started removing my makeup. I'm like, you didn't talk about the looks while having the looks on your eyes, Alicia. But that means we could get straight into the third round, which I'm excited for because I don't think I have created a more monochromatic magenta eye using Roxa yet. I was mixing the magenta with the orchids and then staying with the orchid violet themes of things. I think it'll be fun to now combine both Cerise and Heather, see what that yields, and maybe apply Brink on the lid and truly embracing the more magenta side of the palette. And like I had said at the top of the video, and even in my palette swap video, that if you wanted this to be more magenta leaning, you can totally make that happen by inviting shades that are already in My Dream and in Retro. And Sunrise, remember, hold on. Sunrise is quite special because this is Natasha's first ever midi. I'll never forget when this first dropped and people saw the price, but they didn't see the dimensions of the palette and they were like, oh my gosh. And when we realized how this was significantly smaller than her usually released 15 pan palette, it was a whole new era for Natasha Denona. But man, and I'm looking at this now. Aster, oh my gosh, Aster is basically the palette compact. We found it. I thought it was Bite. What was it? I forgot the name of the shade that I swatched from Pastel. Pastel had a similar shade, but Aster is basically the Roxa compact, okay? Because that has that orchid base with that mint flip. I can't believe I didn't include this in my palette swap video. You could also bring in Azalea, you can bring in Awakening, right? Or even Glory. I could quickly swatch Glory next to Cerise. Cerise, just from looking at it, is a lot more muted. So here is Cerise from Roxa, and here is Glory from Sunrise. But look at the difference in matte quality here. I realize that Sunrise is significantly older than Roxa, but just the upgrade in matte quality, I think, just demonstrated here beautifully the saturation of the color, the depth, and the smoothness of the swatch compared to the more little dry quality of Glory. But we made it work. Maybe we could have a little bit of a feature, yeah, and invite Aster into the mix by applying this on the lid for our 6th eye. I know this was supposed to be an exclusive Roxa palette video in presenting 6 looks, but we gotta do it. We gotta do a little feature, family. All right, but we'll first start off with our first eye, which I had said to make it more magenta leaning, just using the Roxa palette. Ooh, but are we gonna go back into Sunrise and pull in a more like magenta wine leaning metallic shade? Is that happening? That kind of reminds me of Pure. Before we get crazy, let's stay on track here. First, moving in with Heather. Again, that is the Coral Matte in Roxa, and let me use my Shoto 01 because I want this to be, or excuse me, 03. I want this to be a little more blown out, and my T3 is good for hybrid blend precision work, but I need my Shoto brush to carry this color out further beyond my lash line. And you probably can use this shade. You know what? Let me see if I can do that. I need a small brush, and thank goodness for Bobo and Yoshiki's collab brush. This is the Red Canadian Squirrel. Is it red or white Canadian? One of those. This brush head is small enough to pop into these shadow pans. And I'm taking a little bit of Heather and bringing that around the eyes. Ooh, that's pretty. You don't have to do this, but I think it lovely to invite that shade and just blend it down and around the temples, right? And this brush is fantastic because it's soft, but it has the right amount of stiffness to move the eyeshadow pigments more, since I think they're not going to perform the same as a blush does. So to have that little bit of stiffness to create that fluidity around the eyes, I think is important. Now we'll go in with Cerise, the cherry, or I should say the magenta something matte, just to create a little more depth here. And I can go halo as well. Another reason why I love the T3 so much is because it is crucial to create that inner smoke bracket but still be in control of the placement, again because of the pointed barrel head shape of the brush. Pulling it through, oh gosh, don't fall, across the crease. And now with our Shoto number 2, to ensure that we get that same shade here on the lower lash line. This is sickly eye time. It has arrived. You know how I like to dabble. I mean, it is October with this concept, and I understand it's not for everyone. 100% family. You do not have to go this route, but boy, do I love like a dead sickly eye moment. It's kind of like why I love retro so much. Just that Edgar Allan Poe, dead rose, melancholy, sad, dark romance. Yes. But I think it would be quite fun to pull in a little bit of Sweet Pea, this light lilac, and pulling it, that kind of like, that we got a different color altogether. That ain't bad. I think that's fun. Just grazing it here along the edges. I like that. Now with Brink. Brink, I think, will be beautiful here as our standout lid moment. And as I had described before, that Brink's color is beautiful, but the translucency of it also when you blend out the edges and how it doesn't completely cover a cerise, but that color still shows through from underneath. It's just a beautiful combination, right? We still got a little bit of that smoke going on, and I can bring in a little bit of Brink also here on the center of my lash line, that spotlight crying dazzle effect that I like to do sometimes. And now for the inner corner, I'm bringing in Flutter, which is much more violet leaning, but I think it's a good combination, especially since we applied Sweet Pea here on the inner arc. Adding Flutter to that just brings that color more forward. And just pulling cerise here out from the lower lash line to connect. Okay. That's not bad. And also, gotta do Flutter. I'm just tapping Flutter because I still want Brink to show through, but bumping up that reflectivity. Look at that. You see what I'm saying? Okay. All right, now it is feature time. Okay, what shall we go in with first? You know what? Do we want to see Sweet Pea on its own, or we want to see Velour on its own again? You know what, actually? I want to see Phoebe in action. Phoebe is the lightest matte, and truly want to experience what this has to offer, right? Because people will dismiss this shade as too light, useless, and that very much well can be the truth. But I'm using now my T6 from my Kiyaki Kakishibu eye set and stamping Phoebe on, and it has like a cool tone to it. I think a nice setup for possibly, you know what, let me go in Velour. Velour is our medium lilac shade on the inner corner, and then carrying that through the crease, bringing a little more here along the lower lash line, and now a little bit of Jacaranda on top. And just seeing that, and that was another characteristic I was curious about discovering with this new Silky Matte formula, is sometimes in the past, and this I think was prevalent in Natasha's Safari palette, that matte formula doesn't have the same grab as these silky mattes do. So when you start to layer too many mattes at once, they start to fade. But with the silky matte formula, I think it is evident that you can successfully combine up to 3 mattes and the last matte will not fade. In fact, it will enhance the overall color of the previous matte applied. So Velour, I think, is making Jacaranda appear more vibrant. You see what I'm saying? And having Phoebe there initially just helps smooth out the gradient even more. So this Silky Matte formula, you know, I know it's matte and not as dazzling as her Wet Effect or Sparkling Foiled formulas, but man, it is a great upgrade from her standard powder mattes. Even from the creamy matte that I think she introduced first in her Star palette, because the mattes before that were soft, but they were very like, almost like Suqqu mattes as they are now. This new Silky Matte formula is, my goodness, and the way, again, you can layer it successfully and it not look splotchy or uneven. I'm bringing in a little more Jacaranda because that is probably from the primer that I did not blend well, so I am tapping more here to ensure that's a little more even. There we go. And also, man, that really bumped up the color, my goodness. All right, here is our feature moment where, yes, you can apply any of the specialized finishes from Roxa, but I'm going in with Aster from Sunrise. Why not? This is basically the Roxa palette. And I know Aster is not giving the same as the Sparkling Foiled and Wet Effect, but that's okay. I will take my time layering over, yes, and make sure I bring the color up to where I need it to go. I could have also went in with Concord first and then with Aster. That wouldn't have been a bad idea. But now following up with Stargirl on the inner corner, I think that will be a great pairing with Aster. And you know what? I could wet the brush. And I have, oh wait, I have setting spray. Let me use my Sample Addiction Tokyo setting spray, wiggling Aster onto my T2 and giving that a nice misty spritz. And now seeing what that does. Oh, much better. Much better. Yes. And let's capitalize on a little bit of moisture here that we got and use Stargirl again and placing that on the inner corner. Ooh. Ooh. And just for kicks, if you wanted a Magnolia moment, something like that, Awakening could be something. Dayspring is kind of, it probably is a little warmer than Magnolia, what's found in Leela, but you know what? I don't care. I'm going to go in with Dayspring on the inner lower lash line, because that's what you would do if you had Leela. If you wanted to use Magnolia in some capacity, be it all over the lid or in a more subdued way, Dayspring's pretty. Because remember, Sunrise captures several shades of purple depending on where you are on the globe, and very much coincides with what Roxa could be. I think Roxa is more violet heavy for sure. Oh, that's pretty. And let me grab my nail magnet. Stand by. Before we slap on these lashes, I'm taking out Phoebe. Poor Phoebe. Unwanted, unloved from Roxa, and then substituting that with Aster from Sunrise. Is that better? Does that make it better? This is Aster right here. Ain't that cool? See what I'm saying? This is what you get when you have 1,000 Natasha Denona middies. You have the pleasure of customizing to your heart's content. But I had to bring out Sunrise, and my apologies for not showcasing this palette in my original palette swapping video. That's why I did both. You know what I mean? We got swapping on one video, the looks on the other. But what if, hold on, let's now replicate what we did with Heather on the cheeks, but with now Velour. I think Velour would be a beautiful shade, and maybe even Orchid. If you're deeper than me, you could probably use Orchid as a blush too, but I'm gonna hop into this lilac shade with my same Bobo and Yoshiki brush and toss it here close to and around my eyes. That's pretty. You most certainly 100% can use this as a blush. Now be careful, because if it's too wet around your concealer, that moisture will grab the color and will make it possibly appear muddy, but I think that's why you need an appropriate tool to move around those pigments successfully so they don't settle into one spot or another, but they, you know, they kind of spread out. Oh, let's apply these lashes. I'm excited, and I'll be right back. And here is our final round featuring Aster from Sunrise. I had to add Aster in because, my goodness, this is the exact shadow of the color that this compact takes on, right? And I was scrambling my brain. I am excited about Roxa. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, and that is entirely fine. I guess this video is more so for the person who decided to buy Roxa, whether you love purples, but you think you like purples and you don't know how to navigate the palette. Hopefully this video will help you gain confidence in diving in, using the new Silky Matte formula, taking advantage of these beautifully dazzling effects from the sparkling foiled formula as well as the wet effect ones, and I love it. I adore Roxa. If you're wondering if I think it's better than Mineralscapes, ooh, you're gonna have to wait until my best of video when that releases. I'm still deliberating with myself, because now using Roxa again and capitalizing on all of my Natasha Denona middies and realizing that it's not just about loving one palette, it's about loving the entire portfolio and taking advantage of the ultra favorites that you might have in different midis and mixing them together and having that as a possibility, which I think what Danessa wanted to achieve with her Lightwork 6, except we're only confined to that one Freedom palette, and who knows if Danessa will release more shadows, more face pigments in those pan dimensions so we can mix and match even more in the future. But having as many Natasha minis as I have and possessing the freedom to cocktail to my heart's content, making Roxa more mauve, more vibrant, more diverse. Someone had mentioned they want to see Xenon and Roxa together. That will be a beautiful matchup, and we'll have to wait for another video, but it's on the queue, friend. Don't you worry about that. I read that comment. All that to say, let me know if you received Roxa yet, if you've been playing with your other palettes, not just from Natasha Denona, but creating your own Roxa moment with indie singles and the like. I would love to know down below. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching my entire video. Consider at least liking it. Maybe subscribe. I would suggest that you do if you want to see more palette swapping, palette mashups, and tutorials. Click that red button down below. I'll make sure to see you in the comments and on here again soon.